kind of segueing to more of like the societal level of what it means for science. I know I've had friends who they're in their PhDs right now and they've complained that they've gotten peer reviewed. And like, I mean, again, most of my friends who are researchers hate the peer review process just in general, but they've complained and I felt like they've like anecdotally observed like this person just reviewed my paper using AI. Like they didn't actually try to understand the depth of it and they're going into it as a reviewer using AI. What do you think happens to what the process that is peer review, publishing, all that sort of stuff becomes if AI writing becomes more common?
Yeah, I think we are probably are headed for a world in which you're getting a lot of systems written by AI and then thereby reviewed by AI. And I
Hmm.
think we've had this conversation about the dead internet theory. Like, I think certainly there are going to be aspects of that that bleed into science. I think that the trouble with this in the practical sense is that kind of by definition, not speaking about review papers or anything like this, thinking about just specifically novel scientific papers, those are by definition trying to contribute new knowledge to the kind of existing body of literature. As we know, these large language models in their current state are more regression machines.
Hmm.
They're able to kind of find the consensus, that kind of thing. And so I think that as a pure review agent, there are still some gaps that need to be filled in order for a large language model to truly be capable of that
Hmm.
task, right? Because that task fundamentally involves assessing the presentation of new knowledge and then using the stated experiments and methods inside of that manuscript to say, are these new conclusions that shouldn't exist anywhere else if they're truly novel, backed up by the process and the experiments outlined in this paper? That's
Hmm.
the assessment that the reviewer is trying to do, right? Are these conclusions reasonably supported by the work presented here and the existing body of knowledge? If yes, move it down. If not, recommend revisions or review, et cetera. And so AI certainly has a place there because especially in that last thing I said, which is new conclusions backed by results presented in this paper and in the body of prior existing knowledge. Basically, that prior
Hmm.
existing knowledge is becoming ever more expansive. And so you need some of these tools to be able to kind of tell a reviewer all of the maybe nuance they're unaware of, right? Like when I'm reviewing
Hmm.
a paper, I may not be an expert in a particular aspect of it, whereas I am maybe an expert in a different aspect. Now I can be much more informed about about the kind of aspects that I'm not an expert in ways that
Hmm.
simply again weren't possible before.
I see. How are your peers using like AI tools? Like, would you say that you're more advanced compared to most people in being AI native? Like, where do you think it lands? Obviously, going to Duke, I imagine folks are relatively tech forward, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do. I don't know anyone that's not using it at all. Meaning, like
okay.
everybody is at least playing around with ChatGPT. Everybody's at least playing around with like, can this thing help me find papers? Can this thing help me plan experiments? Can this thing help me with my writing or help me with my review process or otherwise? People are certainly integrating it into their own workflows. Everybody right now is doing so with a little bit of hesitancy in the sense that they know it hallucinates, they know it makes stuff up. So they're still relying on being able to go and find that PDF themselves, being able to go and click
Hmm.
on the DOI to actually be able to use it. But as far as writing first drafts of
Hmm.
things, I see a lot of people at least templating with the AI, if not generating parts of those drafts directly. And I also see a lot of language to language translation, right? Because you have a
Hmm.
lot of people who don't speak in English as their primary language, but science is obviously disseminated in English for a majority of the world. And so that translation step is perhaps the most kind of probably the most ubiquitous use case. I would
Hmm.
say that's anecdotal for sure, but I think
Yeah,
I'd be fairly confident in saying that's a fairly general observation.
I see. What, so I guess like, if we're to take like a high level, like AI coding had a really big moment with what Cursor is, right? Everyone moved from ChatGPT and Anthropic and copying and pasting results into their code editors. What do you think like the Cursor for science ends up being able to do? Like, what is that product or
Yeah,
tool capable of?
it. I think the shortest answer I can give you is that it enables people to run better experiments and eliminates the wasteful experiments that currently happen. And there's pros and cons to the wasteful experiments, but what happens right now in science, simply because like by definition it is discovery, is you have a lot of
Hmm.
things that you try that simply don't work. I think
Yeah.
that the greatest hope for AI in science specifically is that more of the things scientists try will work and will have the intended consequences, and less
Hmm.
of the things they try won't work.
Yeah. I see. But what do you think that like, does that mean simulation? Does that mean like, is it the planning step? Does it mean in an ideal future, there's actually something that's able to run the experiment in some like virtual environment?
Yeah, I do think we have. So, like a lot of the experiments we run in our lab right now are robot assisted or robot designed, and I mean,
Mm,
like I don't mean human like robot. I mean
yeah.
simple programmatic robotic arms handling liquids, moving things one way or the other. In the same way that robot assisted fabrication of electronics has been the state of
Yeah.
the art for decades. I think that simulation, absolutely. I think that kind of not necessarily simulation in the sense of generating synthetic results, although I do think that's going to happen. I think simulation in the sense that you're going to have a lot of scientists, especially early scientists, that are helped in not doing some of the more foolish things they would have
Yeah.
otherwise done, right? Mixing a chemical in a chemical reaction that renders the entire results completely null and void because two chemicals reacted in a way that student wasn't aware of. And usually that's not
Mhm.
harmful reactions. It's just simply like, you have the pH at the wrong level. Therefore, biology in the way that it should happen can't happen because you forgot to
Yeah.
adjust this one kind of small dial, right?
Yeah.
And so I think you're just going to start to seeing, again, if you just improve the efficiency of every
Hmm.
experiment run by 10%, you're going to have a lot more successful experiments, right? And you're reducing the amount of human error, especially in the planning phase, is going to be substantial. And then
I
as
see.
soon as you get to a stage where synthetic data is actually reliable in the sense that
Mhm.
like it can simulate 10 hypothetical outcomes and it has that high level of accuracy in doing so, then
Mhm.
yeah, you're going to get accelerated experimentation. So we've already seen some emerging papers about people that are doing novel therapeutics that are designed almost entirely with some version of AI, or with a large language model or some kind of specialized, fine-tuned um, model that's for antibodies or whatever biomolecules, small molecules, whatever it is.